How's it going, everyone? It's Leroy Twizzlers here, and I've been playing Planetside since 2018, and I've played video games in general since 1998, mainly Quake and Unreal Tournament, various MMOs, and a couple MOBAs over the years. I was introduced to Planetside through Blop, joining them in 2017 through a different game called Eternal Crusade, and then also joining DA in March of 2019. In this video, as the title probably has already told you, I'll be covering how to try and help improve upon your aim, whether you're looking for more information, or wanting to begin trying to perfect your aiming, or if you're just a complete beginner and want to find somewhere to start. Do keep in mind, all of what I'm covering should not be taken for absolute gospel. In fact, it is just my personal way of thinking and what I believe works best for how I improved over the years and still continue to improve on my play to this day. So without further ado, let's get started. So, on the topic of lowering sensitivity, you've probably already heard it many times before, but the statement still rings true. In the general sense of sensitivity, having a lower sensitivity will, in general, improve your aim due to offering more stability in your recoil control, your tracking, your twitch aim, your flick shots, crosshair placement, what have you, etc. Something to point out, however, is when people tell others to lower their sensitivity, players generally will take the wrong route in doing this. They will generally drastically lower their sensitivity rather than doing it relative to their current sensitivity values that they've been using forever. So, for instance, if I were to play on a 10-inch per 360 hipfire and a 20-inch per 360 ADS, a drastic change would be somewhere in the realm of going down to like a 16 to 20-inch hipfire and a 27 to 33-inch ADS. Obviously, even worse if I were to exceed that value more so. An ideal lowering would be to go from what I would say a 10 to a 13 inch and at the 20 inch down to probably in the realm of 22.5 to 24 inches. After changing your sensitivity, if it still feels too low, you could actually raise it from those lowered values an even smaller amount than the amount you started lowering those sensitivity values from. So if you lowered it from a 3 inch, raise it by like 1 inch or so. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, if it feels too high after lowering it, you could actually lower it even further, but once again, make sure you lower it in even smaller amount than what you already lowered it to, otherwise you're going to get too drastic in your lowering and you're going to mess up your muscle memory. This process is tend to what I call min-maxing, but other people probably call it something different, but that's what I've been calling it for years. I just call it min-maxing. So the benefits of doing the min-maxing version of this rather than doing it drastically like most people tend to do is it's going to help build your muscle memory much quicker, and it's also going to make it a lot easier to get comfortable with in terms of having a different sensitivity. Now, do keep in mind what I said at the beginning of the video. This is just my personal experience and it's my personal way of doing this stuff, so it might not work for you, but the general consensus that I've gotten when I've helped people personally, like on 1v1 basis and whatnot, is generally this tends to work much better than doing it drastically, so take with that what you will. Another very important part of perfecting your aim, or improving your aim, is the type of mouse that you're using. And yes, there are good and bad mice in terms of having better aim. For example, Zowie mice used to rule the market years ago in terms of the best revered shapes that players liked. However, nowadays, those shapes have been used and improved upon by other companies, leaving Zowie quite outdated these days due to poor button quality, thick rubber cables, awful scroll wheels, subpar side buttons, higher weight values than most mice out today, and an outdated 3310 sensor. However, the newer models that Zowie are making and re-releasing at least have a 3360 sensor in them, and their shapes are still the same great ones that people have loved for years. However, my general recommendation is to stay away from Zowie mice until they quote-unquote go with the times, so to speak. Same thing can be said about SteelSeries. They have great shapes, but their hardware is a bit outdated aside from their True Move sensor, which I believe is their version of either a 3360 or a 3389. So it's a good sensor, but their hardware is a bit outdated. So ideally, when you're looking for a new mouse that's going to benefit your aim, the general rules that I like to follow are to get a mouse that has a good, simple shape, has low weight, has a top-of-the-line optical sensor, which is generally not a problem these days, a fabric-like mouse cord, or hell, even no cord at all if you want to go wireless. Now, when I say fabric-like mouse cord, I'm pretty sure everyone here knows I'm talking about paracords. These mouse companies, generally, they have what I call a pseudo paracord. It's not exactly a CISA paracord, but it's close enough that it might as well be called a paracord. They're pretty much weightless, and you can pretty much almost not feel them whatsoever when you're flicking your mouse around, especially if you're using a much lower sensitivity. Like my mouse, for instance, I have an actual paracord in it, and I just do not feel it whatsoever. This is generally the reason why I stick away from Zowie mice and SteelSeries mice, because they haven't actually started putting these quote-unquote paracord cables in their mice yet. They're still sticking to like thick rubber cables that don't really flex all that much, and you can feel them when flicking your mouse around a lot. Now, mice I've used in the past that would definitely qualify would be mice such as the Glorious Model O, Glorious Model D if you're an ergonomic mouse user and not an ambidextrous mouse user, the wire-to-wireless Razer Viper, the Logitech G Pro Wireless, my mouse, which is called the Endgame Gear XM1. It's a bit hard to get right now, but it's an extremely good mouse if you do happen to get your hands on it. For smaller hands, I'd recommend the Cooler Master MM710, the Mini Razer Viper, or the Glorious Model O-. There's some other mice out there, more than likely, but these are generally the easiest and best to get these days in terms of weight, quality, sensor, and cord, or no cord if you choose to go wireless. Next topic I wanted to cover and explain a little bit more in depth is field of view. Now, there's always been an opinion difference between a lot of players between low FOV, high FOV, saying, oh, this FOV is better, no, this one is, no, dude, this one's better. Field of view in its entirety is mostly personal preference. However, there are advantages and disadvantages on both ends of this, so I do want to outline them just so you guys know, so you know which one you feel like picking. Now, I'll also have some pictures going on in the background of the video, so you can visually see what I'm talking about here. It's all pretty self-explanatory though, but I'm just going to have them there just in case, just so you can get a little better idea. So, lower FOV values have bigger heads, but you can't see around yourself as much due to being more zoomed in the camera. Recoil will also be much more apparent on lower FOVs, since there's less area being covered on your view. Now, on the other hand of the spectrum, on higher FOVs, recoil will become much less apparent the higher you go. Your game is going to zoom out, allowing you to see what's around you a little better, not needing to flick as much, and the game's going to feel faster due to the zoom out fishbowl eye effect, as people call it. Now, all that does sound quite good, right? Well, it is quite good, but there is one pretty big downside to higher FOVs. The higher the FOV you go, the smaller enemy player heads are going to appear due to you zooming yourself out a lot the higher the FOV you go. Now, that being said, recoil being less visually apparent does help with this, but it's still quite a large downside, and you will notice it early on, if you really want to try to get used to it, that it will screw you over sometimes. Also, despite your sensitivity being on the same 360 value, the feel of it is going to change based on your field of view. So the higher you go, it's going to feel lower and stiffer. The lower you go, it's going to feel faster. So normally when you're changing your sensitivity and your FOV, or just changing your FOV, you are still going to need to change your sensitivity alongside your FOV. So just do keep in mind when you are changing your FOV, make sure you're also minorly changing your sensitivity the more you go up or the more you go down in your FOV. Now, my personal thoughts on this is, in my experience, I've spent almost a year on 90 FOV myself, and I've spent nearly the same, if not more time on the 65 to 80 FOV range. I would probably say the best all-around average field of view would be 74, which is the in-game maximum currently. For me, heads are just big enough, recoil is quite nice, you can still see around yourself enough to react appropriately, and sensitivity doesn't feel too fast nor too stiff for me on 74. On that note, 65 would be the low end, and 80 would be the higher end. 90 would be the extreme high end if you want pure, very low recoil feel, and to be able to see through the fourth dimension around you if you really want that. If you can get used to very small head hitboxes, then 90 FOV is definitely for you. However, my safer recommendation would definitely be 80 if you want to go a higher than normal in-game FOV. Now, do keep in mind, like I said earlier though, it's mostly personal preference. These are just things that I want you guys to know about when you are changing your FOV, whether it be lowering or increasing it. So this is a VR training area towards the bottom middle of the map. The regular dummies work just as well, but I tend to like to practice in this area since it's more secluded from the EMP and smoke spammers, quite frankly. Basically, I'm just practicing my recoil control, flick aim, and correcting flicks with my twitch aim if need be on these dummies. This is what I also recommend any newer players to do to get a feel for the TTK of their weapons. These dummies don't have nano weave on, I believe, but it's still a helpful thing to do regardless. Whenever I want to test out a new FOV and sensitivity, I tend to just sit here and aim for about 10, maybe sometimes 15 minutes and see if it feels good or if I want something that I think will feel more comfortable to me. I highly recommend doing this area, but if you really want to, you can still just do the regular VR training area on the dummies at the firing ranges. And sort of just to take a bit of a segue off this, if you ever feel like you just won't improve and you've plateaued in your aim, Just know that it's completely normal, and with more practice, you will guaranteed surpass your previous self. In the world of aim, there is always room for improvement, especially if you keep a good mindset. Now, my mindset, as absolutely ridiculous as it may sound to some of you, is that if I'm not aiming as good as an actual aimbot cheat, then I'm not good enough. You can give yourself small goals if you want, but I find that if I give myself much harder to reach goals like that one, I put in a lot more effort and I learn much faster that way. And that's about it for the video, really. I hope that out of all of my gibberish, you all got at least a little bit of help in how to improve your aim. And with that being said, I will end this video with a bit of gameplay, and I will see you all next time.